Welcome back to the Zero to Hero podcast. I am your host, Denny Dumas, producer Carl. How are you doing, buddy? Really good. We have a pretty awesome guest in the house tonight. One of the questions I'm going to ask him is where he got this nickname from, but Scotty Wolf, that's not his name. His name is Scotty Bordignon. Scotty, thanks for joining us, buddy.
No worries. Thank you very much.
I guess we got to address it now.
Yeah.
Where did the nickname come from?
So Scotty Wolf was a weird one. I think so as a lot of my persona is I've always been a big hairier gentleman. I think
Phenomenal beard, by the way.
Thank you.
Great beard.
Thank you very much. It's a lot of pride. If I knew better, then I probably would more Scotty Bear, just to appease all my gay friends, and I fit in that category. I get a lot of free drinks down at the Pump Jack. But Wolf sort of came, I think, from the fact that I used to do my hair in spikes with Dippity Doo back when it was cool in grade 7, 8, 9 there, and thought I was really cool with that Wolverine hairdo, and had a little facial hair earlier than most. So it was one of those things that I just got a nickname. Wolf was the nickname, and it stuck for a long time. And yeah, I don't know. Not too many people know that one.
Is that right?
Yeah, not too many people know the Scotty Wolf. Know me as Scotty Wolf. Have ever heard of me as Scotty Wolf? That's a throwback to I guess what, 15, 19 years ago, 20 years ago now.
We can thank Alex for that one.
Yeah, of course.
That's how he introduced me to you the first time.
Yeah, that's it. He might be the only person who still calls me Scotty Wolf.
Really?
So yeah. Oh yeah. yeah. So we'll roll with it.
I want to talk a little bit about live music. We were chatting about it before we started recording. I went to a concert last night. I love live music. But people at concerts are just ridiculous. Like, how obnoxious are these people? And maybe it's our fault for standing close to the stage, but as the show goes on, 19-year-olds get more and more intoxicated, and they just start like not giving a shit about anyone. So there's like drinks flying all over the place. People are elbowing you in the face. Like, nobody cares, especially when their song comes on that they've been there waiting to hear their song. They just go nuts. But Commodore is such a cool venue where like you just kind of got to embrace the animal atmosphere as you walk in door.
Yeah, well, just a tag team off that and cutting completely. What we were talking about, the last concert I was at the Commodore was Steel Panther, and I forgot to tell you guys that. So Steel Panther's wild, everything's going on, and this place is nuts. I get knocked in the back of the head by some chick who was crowd surfing. Just got thrown into the back of my head. So I go flying forward. Turn around, what the fuck just happened? And sure enough, she's like, "Oh, sorry." Pick her back up, keep her tossing around. So, I mean, welcome to the Commodore, right? I think that's true for everything. I feel like that's we just a couple guys. We all just picked her back up and kept tossing her back around. She went and made all the way back, and yeah.
Have you ever crowd surfed, Carl?
No, never.
Scotty?
Come on.
What?
It's like if Jack Black went to crowd surf at the beginning of School of Rock there. Just sort of jump onto nothing.
Is that a comparison you get?
No, I don't. Not very often. I don't get Jack Black. I usually get more like a Zach Galifianakis or Seth Rogen before he lost the weight, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I was listening to a Seth Rogen podcast today. Actually, he was good on Dax, who Megan recommended. And Seth Rogen's pretty entertaining too. Our friend here, Scotty, he has an affiliation, and we'll get into this, with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. I feel like you
watch the game. You let
that one linger for a reason. I do. Yeah, I was in and out of the game. It's a hard one. I've got history in that game in a couple ways. One, through Kansas City. The second one is my freshman year of college. I was in Philadelphia when Andy Reid and the Eagles lost to Bill Belichick and
Donovan McNabb
and the Patriots. Donovan McNabb. So I've seen this a couple times now, being devastated by the Patriots. I will sort of leave it like that. I guess it's hard. You can't bet. You cannot bet against the Patriots. Bill Belichick, Tom Brady.
There were two super entertaining games yesterday, though. Holy cow!
Yeah,
they're so good.
Yeah.
Even I was at a bar downtown before the concert watching the end of the Pats game, and as soon as Casey Oh no, I guess they went into overtime.
You went over that one.
But like as soon as Casey scored to go up, what was it 23-20, I think?
Okay.
But they scored with 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
And so as everyone in the bar is just like, it's going to be another New England win.
Yeah.
We've seen this story 58 times already. Every time Tom Brady has the ball, 2 minutes left, he wins. But like, I feel like that has to be part of your game plan, is that if you have the ball in the fourth quarter, you can't score unless there's like 30 seconds left.
Yeah. It's nobody does a 2-minute drill better than Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. So
it's just so efficient.
They know the game. And did you look at the stat yesterday? It was like prior to this postseason, I think the amount of Kansas City Chiefs players who've been in the postseason, 0. The amount of New England like players who, I guess if you tally up all the games, or maybe it's like AFC final or something, it's 0 to 132 games. So if you're looking at stats that way, I mean, it was bound to happen. I hate to say it, there's a little bit of a curse with Andy Reid when he breaks that finally, and if he wins the Super Bowl, hopefully he does in the next couple of years, for my sake as well, as a fan of Kansas City.
It was Andy Reid back in the day when you were in Philly.
When I was in Philly, yeah, he was the one. He moved down from Philly to Kansas City.
You just can't beat Tom.
He can't win more than 2 games in a postseason, regardless. Like, he had to buy this time, otherwise he would have been out last week. That's Andy Reid.
You got to give credit to those guys, Brady and Belichick, but I hate them with a passion.
I think it's hard not to. I mean, the heavy is the crown, right? I mean, I hate them this year. And last year too, because I hopped on the Eagles bandwagon. So I can't, I guess, remember last time I really liked them. But it's hard not to respect them. It's hard not to hate them because they're good. Hey, come on. It's difficult.
Every year though, they start the season slow, and you're like, all right, this is the year they're not going to make the playoffs, and then they're the number 2 seed.
Yeah.
And the AFC Championship every time.
My favorite was, I think it was like week 3 or something like that, week 2 or 3. A reporter asked Bill Belichick, "Hey, so do you think it's time to sit Tom Brady?" And Bill Belichick just stares for about 3 minutes. Just stares.
He's
next question
in interviews. Yeah,
he's great. I mean, he's one of those guys. You hear about these guys that are loved and the guys that are hated, and I think everywhere he's genuinely loved. He does so much for charity. He does so much for giving back to the game and to the people, but he definitely has that persona in the media rooms. It's funny to see, and then it's funny to hear about how nice he is outside of it, right? His kid, I'm pretty sure his kid's a lacrosse player. His son's a lacrosse player. Yeah. And I think his grandson, if he's got one, is a lacrosse player.
I think they said a stat yesterday. I think I heard this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of you, but New England, for the last 8 years, has got a first round bye in the playoffs.
That wouldn't surprise me.
8 years in a row.
But they didn't have it this year, did they? They didn't have. No,
New
they
England?
played in the.
They're the number 2 seed. New England's number 2 seed.
Yeah, you're
first
right.
round bye, so first or second.
Yeah,
Not that they win the AFC.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah.
That's insane.
That's stupid. That's ridiculous.
That's probably a number that no one's ever going to be close to.
No, this is a dynasty to end dynasties, right? Yeah. Everybody, but then I guess everybody said that about Pittsburgh back in the day with Terry Bradshaw and going 5. I mean, nobody has yet to do undefeated season since the Dolphins,
right? So
I guess these are some of the ones you're not going to touch.
Yeah.
So, and he's still going like that. They're not done. They can win it this year. They can lose it this year. It's going to be the same team next year. You're still going to have with maybe Rob Gronkowski not there. It seems
he's just so injury prone now.
Yeah, at a certain point in time, you got to hang it up. And but yeah, I think the next couple of years you're going to see Tom Brady on that field for another 2-3 years. No problem. I feel like he's gonna be one of those guys that dies on the field. You know, like he just keeps playing and playing and playing, and like you got to be like, you're not gonna stop him from playing, and then all of a sudden he's just gonna like keel over, and he gave it his all. You know, bury him at the center of Foxborough.
Okay, let's meet our guest Scotty Wolf a little bit. It's natural.
We'll go with
I'm gonna get out of it.
We'll break it.
Not that we know each other that well, but I just know you through Alex. He's like one of my best buddies.
Yeah, exactly.
And every time he talks about you a lot, actually. Yeah, every time he talks about you, it's always Scotty Wolf. So it's just like ingrained in my head.
Fair enough.
I'm going to get it out.
Enough.
Scotty.
No. Yeah.
We're going to get to know Scotty.
Sure. Let's do it.
Every podcast, I ask my guests to describe themselves in 3 words.
Oh, wow. That's
just to give some insight into who you are to the listeners.
Yeah.
Also to give me a little bit to go on.
Sure. 3 words that describe me. Intense. I think in one way or the other, it could be intense in terms of having to be the best, like a competitively intense or perfectionist intense when it comes to the shucking side of things and the way I want things set up. Or it could be intense in the way in how relaxed I can get to. And all of a sudden, we'll get to a certain point where I'll just go, fuck it. Let's see what happens. Let's roll the dice. What's the worst that can happen? And so there's an intensity on both sides of that. So I think intense could be one. Jovial, humoristic.
How can you define jovial? This is a big word. I've never heard this one before on the podcast.
It was on my calendar. That's the only reason. My word of the day calendar. So that's why.
This morning,
exactly. I just ripped it off today because I think I just heard this on the radio. Jovial. I guess that works because today's apparently the saddest day of the year.
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah. So this is good. This would be a good podcast.
I guess
for
3 weeks after the new year, people's credit card bills come in from Christmas and stuff. Yeah.
They realize that they're just as alone in 2019 as they were in 2018. So you got to live with it or you don't, right? So that's always tough. But yeah. So jovial is a good one. And I think the third one would be methodical. I do like to think. I like to spend time. I do like to spend time planning. Whether or not I execute on anything I've planned is a different story.
Okay.
But I do like spending time to think about things and sort of rolling with the punches and seeing. I like problem solving and being methodical helps me see the goal and develop a plan to get to that goal.
Okay.
So
I want to start with intense competitive.
Sure.
Where does that come from? To me, obviously a lot of my background is sport, and I know yours is too.
Yep. So
I want to chat a bit about that. But it's such a carryover trait that goes into the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
It's into business world, it's into like personal life and relationships. And to me, I look at competitive as like wanting to get better.
Yeah.
So that's how I define it. Maybe it can be defined differently from different people.
I would agree. I think there's a bunch of different definitions of competitive, and one of them for me is to get better. I definitely want to get better for myself, to get better in the craft, to get better in doing what I do. The other side of it is to be the best. And that's a constant struggle because, to be perfectly honest, I think my biggest motivator is failure, and it's a double-edged sword. I want to be the best, so I set the bar as wanting to be the best. Now, if I fall short of that, it's a failure. If I hit that, I didn't set the bar high enough, so I'm a failure at setting the bar, which develops this really weird circle of me never having success. But I think that drives me in certain ways too to become better, to become the best, and I mean, I haven't been shucking for that long, so to learn and see the guys who've been doing it and the guys who I respect and the guys who I know and meet and who are incredible at what they do, it's a nice learning process, and it's humbling. I think being humble while being competitive is important. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who will look at me or will talk about me and listen to me talk about being humble and say it's bullshit. Not humble. One of the most egotistical guys I know, but at the same point in time, I think there needs to be a little bit of bravado with competition as well. I mean, we all do it in the competitive world.
Is anyone successful though that's not confident in themselves? So I look at what you're saying and say, sure, maybe it comes off as egotistical a little bit, but it's really just self-confidence.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is where it gets weird for me. Is I think there's a self-confidence that's rooted in doubt, so to be able to overcome that doubt and to prove to not necessarily anyone but myself that it's okay to be confident, that's okay to talk this way. It's okay to realize that that I'm good, that you're good at what you do. And that's part of that competition, I think. So I agree. Like, there's self-confidence, there's bravado. I still think there's a little bit of cockiness and egotisticalness about it, a little bit of arrogance, but it's a beautiful thing.
There's a fine line there.
There's a very fine line, and I realize I guess I'm a chronic line stepper, so I'm all right with it.
Okay, so for people who don't know Scotty runs a oyster shucking business, and we're going to talk about that.
Yep.
We're going to talk about where your passion for oysters comes, because you're the most knowledgeable human I've ever met. And not that I've met a ton of knowledgeable oyster people, but like I couldn't see finding someone that knows more about the oyster than you do, which is really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate
especially
that.
on your pursuit to be the best in this industry. To me, like, where's the competition? You're the fucking Tom Brady of oysters right now.
I'm not quite there. For the guys who may stumble upon this, who are the Tom Brady's of oyster shucking, I'm not saying I'm there. But yeah, no, there's definitely I run.
Before we started recording, he did say that though.
Yeah, so. There we are. There's nobody in the oyster world but me. So I run my own traveling raw bar business. I do primarily oysters and caviar. So definitely niche, but a premium niche, which makes it kind of a cool place to be in terms of business. So, I don't know if there's a question I was supposed to answer there, but
no, you're doing just fine. Okay, I like learning more about backstories. I like figuring out what makes a person who they are.
Yep. Where
this competitive nature comes from, where this slight egotistical
the cockiness
nature comes from. Is it sport for you? So your backstory in sport is heavily in lacrosse. Is that right?
Lacrosse and soccer primarily.
Okay.
I played lacrosse for the Burnaby Lakers. I played soccer for the Westburn Bombers. So I grew up in Vancouver and Burnaby primarily. I think my family's always been big in sports. Both my parents were PE teachers. They're retired now. That's why I say were. And I think that they always harbored in my sister and I to be the best that we can be. And for my sister, it became being the best that she could be. For me, it became being better than everybody else. Like that was how I was supposed to be. So there's definitely a push for that. I remember I was a lot more competitive when I was younger. I wanted to be the best, and I would get into arguments. I went to the same school as my dad taught in. He taught me 1 year of PE, where I was in his class only for PE, and I will say he is the worst ref in any sport. He kicked me out of class. I'm one of the first kids he's ever kicked out of class, and he'll say it's because I was arguing back, and I say it was because he was making bad calls that I got kicked out of class. So I was very competitive growing up. It was always pushing it to be better, and I think I did get lucky with being an athlete because of my parents. I think it came naturally to me, and my parents pushed my sister and I into being well-rounded kids. So it wasn't just lacrosse and soccer. We also played basketball, volleyball, track and field in high school. Did dance and sang and did musical theater and all that kind of stuff as well. So there's always a lot of competition in our lives because you're always fighting for that spot. Yeah, we didn't do any. Very rarely did we do an individual sport. I guess track and field would be the closest. I threw shot put and ran a little bit.
Okay.
But that was more of a hobby than it was a competition. Because by the time we went to cities or provincial, I guess by the time we got to provincial, I was grade 12 throwing shot put. I'm this kid who thought I was hot shit, and there's these guys coming from Kelowna who throw hay bales around who are trying to make the Olympic team. I'm like, oh, this isn't for me. So, but yeah, I think a deep root in sports and the arts as well. But I went to school playing sports, and so that was a thing that sort of drove me, keeps driving me, I guess, is that competitive nature of being better, constantly being better, bettering myself and stuff like that. So
how did you get involved in arts and theater? Because for me, looking back at my childhood, because I'm assuming roughly the same age.
I'm a couple years older than you, I'm sure.
I don't know, man. Are you? I don't know.
Well, we'll talk about it off air. We won't reveal anything. There's a little more salt in the beard than there was a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'm starting to get grays too, man. I just look back and think like most of the kids that I knew, it was like you're either, and not that I want to put people in a box, but just from my experience, you're either like artsy or athletic or like intellectual and smart in school. Yeah. You like kind of fit into one of those boxes. Yeah. Whereas you were athletic, played lacrosse at a high level. You I've been referred to as a
little Shirley Temple according to Alex.
But then you also went to grad school, so you kind of fit all three.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how my parents were able to do it. Actually, I think I owe a lot more to them than I'm willing to give them credit for, so that they're not going to find out about this podcast.
Carl, we got to run a Facebook ad for this specific podcast directed solely
neither my parents are on social media. They're just outside that my dad is Facebook. So
okay, we'll send them a cassette tape.
The old 8-track, get the record out, get a fresh press on vinyl. So I actually got into the theater or musical theater, that kind of world, because it's a little bit of a long story. My grandfather, my mom's dad, he grew up in Winnipeg, and World War II happened, and he enlisted, and he had a bad eye. And so when they're doing medicals, he held the card over his bad eye. I remember as much as he could with his good eye, flipped it over, and started recited it. And just before he was about to ship overseas as an infantryman, doctor came over, put over his good eye. He said, "No, I can't read it." So he goes, "Sorry, son, you can't enlist. You can't do it." So he went back to Winnipeg, and he was pretty heartbroken. He couldn't go and fight for Canada over in Europe. And but then this group came around. It was sort of the Canadian version of the USO was coming around. We were looking for people who can entertain the troops. My grandfather had been dancing for years. He'd tap dance and stuff like that. And so he said, I know how to do it. So he actually became the choreographer for this troupe that would come around, or would go around Europe and entertain the troops about a mile or two off the front line. And so when I was born, my parents were like, well, let's get him in the same realm as his grandfather. Let's make Pappy proud. So Pappy and myself, I think I did my first dance with him singing in the rain when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, wearing a big red raincoat, and then it sort of came out. My parents kept doing it. My parents kept saying, "Okay, you're going to do it." And do you want to do it? They never forced us into it, but if we committed to something, they said you have to. Once you commit to something, you're going to do it. You can quit at the end of the year, but you're not quitting midseason. You made that commitment, and so every year came around. You want to do it? Yeah, well, it's over. Yeah, so of course I want to do it next year. Yeah, of course. And I just kept going and kept going and kept going, and then unfortunately I had to get out of it due to sports. Sports sort of took over, and I had to give one up, and that was the one that I ended up giving up was the theater side of it. So
what age was that?
I was probably 16, 17 years old. So I did it for a long period of time. I had a couple of years off there. I did get some injuries, and so the injuries took me out of doing some of the things that I wanted. But it was that was sort of the life.
Do you have any Sweet Home videos?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are Sweet Home videos.
Dude, there's anything on YouTube right now? How can we pull something up though?
There might. I honestly, I want to say I haven't Googled myself, but we go back to the egotistical thing. I don't honestly know. I think I'm outside. I'm outside that era of cell phone video. You know, I think if you have it, some guy's holding a recorder, some sort of recording device that's not a cell phone to take video of that stuff. So.
Isn't that the coolest thing in the world about being part of our era, though? Our generation is that our lives are going to be on the internet forever. So like our great grandkids will be able to look back and be like, "Oh, my grandfather Scotty was so cool."
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird.
He was the most knowledgeable oyster person in the world.
I feel like we're missing out though. I feel like we missed out on the era of taking really grumpy photos. Like I feel like that would have been great if I had like 2 photos of myself and both of them I'm not smiling in. Like, and that was my legacy. You know.
Or the only photo that your family has left is your wedding photo, and it's your like great grandfather who's just like super upset, and then his wife is sitting like 6 or 8 meters away from him on a chair.
I would absolutely.
Did everyone have those photos? Yeah. Okay.
I would actually love it. I've sort of debated this. I found a place that does it somewhere on Granville Street, and it's a place that will do portraits. and I've wanted to just get portraits done and just give them to everybody. It's like those old timey where you like kind of sit nobly off to the side and sort of look, and like that's a patriarchy, and put it right up on top of my parents' mantle and stuff. I just give it out to everybody. Because patriarchy is not a right word. I'm very equal rights. So let's not say patriarchy like I'm a bad guy.
Okay, let's talk a little bit of grad school. So you went away to the States on lacrosse scholarship.
I went to school in Philadelphia. Yeah. I played lacrosse for 3 years down there, tore my ACL. And at that point in time, I hung it up. It was time to focus on a career. Could have kept playing lacrosse, rehabbed real hard, but there's not a lot of money in lacrosse. So I focused on a career that was sort of adjacent, that I unfortunately got to spend a little bit of time in this field. It was in athletic training, athletic therapy, sports medicine type of stuff, and I got to do that because I spent enough time getting my ankles taped and rehabbing and sort of the body hurting and coming out of it. So I ended up getting into that side of things in school. So
people that didn't play university athletics don't understand how much time university athletes actually spend in the training room.
Yeah.
Like I went away for a year to the States, and I was in physio probably 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
5 days a week.
Yeah. So, and that's, I mean, on top of that, it's not, when you get to that level, they expect you to be the best that you can be. Mm-hmm. And, so you would lift, and then you'd go to treatment, and then you do practice, and then there'd be treatment, and then you might have film or a scouting report that you were supposed to look at. So, I mean, it takes up a lot of time. It's a lot of time and commitment that everybody sees it on the field. And it even gets skewed in the sports medicine side of like athletic training, athletic therapy, is they see you on the field and it's sexy. Yeah, that's what you do. You come in, you warm up, and it's beautiful, and you're competitive, and you score a goal, or you knock somebody on their ass, and there's something beautiful to be said about that. But they don't see is they don't see those hours where you're getting treatment. For the athletic therapist, for every hour you're on the field, there's 2 of treatment, and then there's 4 paperwork. Yeah. So, I mean, that made it a very difficult. It's a very paperwork heavy that people don't see. It's not so sexy when you're doing it, when you're up at 8 a.m, making sure all your paperwork's done.
Yeah.
So
I find that it's a pretty natural progression for a lot of athletes to go into sports medicine afterwards.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's sort of the guys who can't give it up. You know, as one way of saying it. Exactly. Is for me, I couldn't give it up. I wanted to be out in the field. I still miss since I've been out of sports medicine, I miss that atmosphere. And it was weird because in sports medicine, you don't get excited. You can't get excited. People often came up to you and say, you look like you're not having a good time. So I'm having a great time. Well, you don't look like it. And I don't look like it because I had to be stoic. I had to think. Exactly. Because if I got excited and then something happened, I'd be really excited and I'd screw up somebody's health, right? So I had to keep an even keel the entire time in case somebody hurt themselves. So that when I came to that situation, it was, okay, let's take a step back and see. Let's make sure we're doing everything right. Let's think logically about how to fix them. So
you went to grad school.
Yep.
You stayed in Philly. Is that right?
I did. Grad school in Philadelphia, yeah.
Okay.
So I went to Temple University for grad school, which is great. I worked with, I did a little bit with football, and then I worked with men's and women's gymnastics, which was fantastic. Men's and women's gymnastics was one of the most eye-opening things for me, because they always used to say, if you can work football, you can work anything. And then you work with these 18 to 21-year-old athletes, half of whom were female gymnastics competitors who were probably a couple years past their prime. I mean, you sort of peak around 16 to 18, really, and I'm getting them towards the end of their sport. Yeah. So, I mean, they're their best when they look like well, they don't look like women, you know, when they're very before they start developing. That's when they're at their prime, and you see when they start becoming women how the physics changes completely. Same thing with the men. I mean, lucky enough for the men just get bigger and stronger, so it's easier to hold yourself on rings. But the women, there's this changes that throws off the way that they're able to throw the body around, and the type of physics and the forces that are put on it, right? I've had athletes who are about my height, female athletes who are about my height, and it doesn't work. You know, like the amount of G forces on a giant over the high bar is astronomically different. So when I got into that, it was like working football. It was the same amount of danger, if not more danger, because an inch can literally mean being paralyzed or not. I mean, it's crazy the amount of times I've seen something happen. You get pretty callous to it, I guess, where you see an injury, you see something happen, you don't even he doesn't even flinch anymore. But the first time you go up there and you see these kids, you see them falling, you're like, what the fuck am I getting myself into? You know, it's this kid's falling here and that kid's falling there, and this kid's arm twisted 3/4 of the way around, and they all get up and they're fine. Yeah, this isn't too bad. And then you realize that you can see the way that they almost release off a bar, or they hit the vault, or they hit the floor, any of the things that they do, the way they sort of jump off the beam. You can tell whether they're going to be safe or not. And it's pretty incredible to get to that point where you can see it before it happens. And that was fun.
How did you weasel your way into that field? I feel like gymnastics is something that is never ever on TV.
Wow, once every 4 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then the Olympics comes on and I'm captivated.
Yeah.
I'm watching gymnastics all the time.
So
I'm like planning my day around, okay, like the women's team finals at 8 p.m. I need to be home, or whatever.
Yeah. It was that one was by accident. We talked a little bit before this started about how things happen by accident. That was one of the ones that happened by accident for me. Is I applied to Temple University and I wanted to work football. My goal was to work football. I was going to be a football guy. I had just come off a internship with the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's why we talked about it. I did an internship with the Chiefs. So I was like, I'm going to be a football guy. I'm only going to work football. That's my sport. I'm going to work for the NFL. I'm going to find a job, and I got my assignment as I would work football in the summer for training camp, and then you're going to work with men's and women's gymnastics. And I threw myself a little bit of a temper tantrum. Called my dad and said, fuck this, I'm not going to this school, this is bullshit, and I cursed and yelled and punched my steering wheel and all that kind of stuff. And then he goes, all right, you done? And I took a step back and I thought about it. I was like, well, you know what, I can learn a lot. This is something I will not get experience with again. So I reluctantly took it, and it was the most eye-opening, incredible experience I could have had. It was everything I loved about football with increased danger, and the psychological side of dealing with some of these athletes was an added element, because they're crazy. Individual sport athletes are nuts. I mean, have you ever golfers? You're a golfer. I mean, that what they say, the hole between your ears is the hardest hole. I mean, the 4 inches between your ears is the hardest hole you'll ever play. And then same thing. Tennis players are nuts. Track and field guys, if they're individual, even the specialists in football are goalies, the guys who are always by themselves. Yeah. They're all weirdos. Like there's no, you can't argue that. You meet one of them, and who's going to stand in front of like a 90-mile-an-hour slap shot, but like somebody who's crazy. You know what I mean? So there's definitely a psychological side, because it was a team sport with gymnastics, but it's also very much an individual sport,
performing individually.
Towards a team. But at the end of the day, I mean, they still have individual medals for different events. So I sort of fell into that, and it was the most incredible, the best experience I think I could have had in grad school as a graduate assistant was to work with men's and women's gymnastics. And anybody who says, oh, you don't know what Scott talking about, football's the hardest one. Bullshit. Give gymnastics a try. Work 2 years with college gymnastics, and then tell me that football's the hardest thing you've ever done. Because I've worked football in high school, college, and I'm professional, and I've worked gymnastics with college. I don't want to work gymnastics with college again. It was 2 years of me pulling my hair out. Like I definitely aged like a president over 2 years. So yeah, it was stressful. It was a lot of work, but it was one of the most rewarding ones, because they were also the ones who appreciate it more. Like the professional guys appreciate what you do for them, because you're getting them on the field, you're making them a paycheck. The college guys almost have this air of, hey man, you're here to take care of me, And then, but you work with the people, the men and women in gymnastics, and they realize what you're doing for them. They're smart. They're a smart group of kids. They're coming from usually a little bit higher socioeconomic background, just because it is expensive.
Yeah.
And they realize what you're doing for them. So there's a lot more, I think, satisfaction from working with gymnastics, which is kind of cool. I guess on a completely different tangent and bore everybody who listens, but yeah.
Oh, very cool. Well, whatever. It's my show, so I get to decide where this conversation goes. And I love watching gymnastics at the Olympics, and so I'm super excited to hear the behind the scenes kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. Actually, I got to meet a couple of the men on the gymnastics teams. They did.
You were in the States. You were like basically training. Or what university was that?
Temple University. I was in Philly. Yeah, Temple. So
I don't know anything about the university gymnastics reign. Like, is that a good school for gymnastics?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? So in the big picture, they were good.
Yeah.
If you're looking at women's gymnastics, I mean, it's like every other sport. SEC sort of reigns king. Right, you have Alabama's always good, and you have like Michigan. Some of the schools up there are pretty good, and Nebraska and UCLA. I think it's Miami. I'm probably if there's any gymnasts listening, I'm sure they're like, oh man, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about gymnastics. But it's been so long since I've done it. Let's cut me some slack here. It's been at least 4 or 5, 6 years, 7 years since I've worked gymnastics.
But okay, so most of the like top end gymnasts in the world are between like what 16 and 19.
Generally speaking, I mean you've got a couple of these women who are going to get up to 22, 24 and are still able to do it. But I mean it becomes like we look at with a bunch of other sports is how are you built genetically, right? If you're able to stay small, you're petite to begin with. It's going to be a little bit easier than if you hit 19, you grow a foot,
right?
And you start developing hips or shoulders get broader or anything along those lines. So there's that comes into play.
It's interesting. It's an interesting sport now. I'm thinking about it because most big sports anyway, most team sports, college is kind of like a catapult into a professional realm. Like if you do really well in college, you're going to play in the NBA or the NFL or the MLB or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think that's the goal for a lot of people.
Gymnastics, the prime seems younger than college.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're usually ID'd for that. My understanding is, if I'm talking to the gymnasts, you're ID'd at a very young age.
Yeah,
and then
I wonder what that is like. Like,
I think the pressure.
What's the identification like when you're like 12 though?
But
is it just your dad sending home videos off his phone?
I don't know. I was never part of that. I'm very happy I wasn't part of it. But I think that's where we get into that.
It's a little disclaimer.
Yeah. But I think that's where we start running into some of these psychological issues that I was dealing with the other side of things. And so, I mean, mental health was always huge for me when I was working in sports medicine, because it's one thing to heal the body. It's another thing to get the mind right, get the mind back into being able to play sports, to getting the mind to, I know you hurt yourself. I know you gave yourself a concussion. You dislocated a shoulder. You broke an ankle doing this skill. It's going to be okay. Your body, trust your body, trust me. That I'm trusting your body, and that was the weird part of gymnastics. And then there's a whole other side of psychology that in sports that we could get into, but we'll sort of save that for
it's fascinating
for another day if we want to,
because so much of sports is mental. And that fascinates me.
Yeah, I mean, if your mind's not right, I'm talking a lot about individual sports, but team sports are the same way. If your mind's not right in team sports, there's an article that just came out about Carson Wentz. He's one of those selfish guys in the locker room, on the field and stuff. He's well liked, but he's incredibly selfish as a quarterback. And you look at guys like, and whether or not that's true or not, I just read that before I got here, and so I'm looking at that. And you compare that to Terrell Owens or Ocho Cinco or some of these guys who are quote unquote cancers on teams. But then you have guys that like Tom Brady who are university. I mean, I hate watching Phillip Rivers. I mean, I feel like every time he gets up, he looks like he's about to cry or whine about something. But the guys love him. Everybody loves him. So who am I as some guy who's sitting on my couch? Oh, fuck Phillip Rivers, And I think there's something to be said about getting your mind right and being able to step out on that field, and the difference between being a leader versus not, or knowing to do just your role, or the guy who wants to pump up the team, or the guy versus the guy who's not. There's a lot of I think psychology involved in that as well. So.
This is me assuming something, but I feel like a lot of people in the sports medicine field, their dream job is to work with like a professional team, right?
Yes and no. I mean, when you start out, you realize pretty quickly on that there's a business side to it.
Sure.
And the business side doesn't always mean satisfaction or happiness. It takes a special sort. I'll say it takes a special sort of idiot to be able to go in and do it over and over and over and over again, right?
Sure.
When I was working in Kansas City, I was working for a guy who had been in the league for 30 years. He's a Hall of Famer. If athletic trainers made it into the Hall of Fame, he'd be one of the ones who made it for sure. Real old school guy. And we were working 18-hour days. We worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. My shortest day was 16 hours. My longest day was 23 and a half hours. And that was just the way the job worked. And that's not ideal for a lot of people. A lot of people like the collegiate atmosphere, Division I, Division II, Division III. A lot of people like high school because high school you get to form and develop these kids, and you get to work with a completely different population than you do in the pros. So there's pros and cons to each level.
It's a different pressure too, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, no. I mean, if you're working for a high school prep school where the kids are looking for Division I contracts or Division I scholarships, I should say. There's a different pressure there, right? And you're dealing with a completely different mentality too, because in high school, if you tell a kid he's not playing, you could potentially have mom, dad screaming, "What the hell do you know? I'm going to go get a doctor's note." And so there's a lot of that as well. So there's different types of pressure. And I can't say, like, I was definitely geared towards professional Division I type athletics. I like dealing with the elite athletes. And I also really enjoyed dealing with sports where if the greater the chance of catastrophic injury was where I felt the most comfortable. And that sounds terrible, but I loved the idea of being able to go out there and potentially dealing with somebody who has a spinal injury or a commotio cordis, which would be like a cardiac arrest type situation or something along those lines. That's what got me excited to get up and to be, not because I wanted it to happen, but because I was confident in my abilities to be the best person in that situation at that time to make sure that the best things happen for that kid. Sure. So that was sort of the way that I saw it.
How does the Kansas City Chiefs opportunity come up?
So it's funny. I didn't apply to the Chiefs. I applied to a bunch of different teams around the league, and my mentor.
So is this pre-grad school?
Pre-grad school, yeah. So this is in 2010. I was there in 2010 with Todd Haley was the head coach. Romeo Crennel and Charlie Weiss were the offensive defensive coordinators, which was a blast. Like two of the biggest characters in football history on the field at the same time. Charlie Weiss had the role in the rascal because he hurt his knee or something like that, and it was always wild to be on the field and look over and see Charlie Weiss like running his mouth, and then Romeo Crennel walking down the field clapping his ass. Great day to play football, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on in my life? But anyways, yeah, I didn't apply to the Chiefs. I actually applied to probably half the other team. I probably sent about 20 resumes out and cover letters, and I didn't send it to the Chiefs. Chiefs are terrible. I didn't want to work for the Chiefs, right? And the guy who one of my mentors, a guy I really respected. I still respect the hell out of him as an athlete trainer. He was a guy I looked up to. I idolized this guy, and I get this letter from Kansas City being like, "Congratulations, you've been accepted to." You've accepted an internship with the Kansas City Chiefs. And so I was like, what the hell is this? So I turned to him, and he had worked with the guy who was the head athletic trainer in Kansas City at the time, Dave Price. Millsy worked with Dave Price when they were in Philadelphia. And they both worked under a guy named Otho Davis, who was he was the first athletic trainer to be put in a ballot box for a Hall of Famer for athletic trainer. Old school, good old boy. Some of the wildest stuff out there. I've heard rumor that he's the reason why there's lock boxes in pharmaceutical cabinets in the NFL. I've heard rumors of that. So he goes, so how's the NFL looking? I said, well, I've applied to a couple places. I got an interview with a couple different cool teams. And he goes, but I got this acceptance letter to the Chiefs. He goes, oh, yeah, that's the one you're taking. I was like, what do you mean? I've got these interviews. He goes, no. You're going to call them and decline. You're working for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I was like, I guess I'm working for the Kansas City Chiefs. So packed up, get out to Kansas City.
What was the backstory there, though? Why is he saying?
Well, because he worked with the head. He was the one who called and said, "Hey, I got this kid.
Gotcha.
I think he'd be really good. I think you really like him. I think you're like really working for him, or him working for you. He's a hard worker, smart kid. Let's get him in there." And so I showed up to Kansas City. It was weird because training camp, you never really get to experience the city.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're go all the time. Like I said, 18-hour days that I went to get barbecue twice, in my 4 or 5 months in Kansas City. I guess 4 months in Kansas City. And that's a city for barbecue. I fell in love with it. Kansas City barbecue is the best barbecue in the world as far as I'm concerned. but that's also probably a little biased as well. So I showed up there, get to the facility. Facility's gorgeous. I love everything. Start packing up. You get that rose-colored glasses. You know what I mean? Everything looks beautiful from when you're there. Working with professional athletes, dealing with the personalities, and so I mean that was sort of the experience that I had with the Chiefs. Loved it. Loved every second of it.
Do you travel with them?
We got one game. We got one road game and 2 home games because I was a preseason intern. So I took, before the athletes reported to camp, we showed up and we sort of packed stuff up and made sure everything got the way it was. Set up the athletic training room at the training facility because we did our training camp at Missouri Western State University, which is in the middle of nowhere. I don't know why people go there.
Missouri State Western?
Missouri Western State University.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's like, I think they have
I find that the more words involved in a university name, the farther in the middle of nowhere it is.
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska, Omaha, right? That's
South, northwestern, eastern state.
Yeah. Was it Eastern Louisiana, Shreveport, or whatever the hell it is? It's in the middle of nowhere. So you land. Yeah, you have to land in the airport and then drive another 4 hours. But I mean, it was a blast. I loved it out there. I mean, it was one of the most eye-opening experiences. I mean, I've been really lucky, I think, in the way that every aspect of my careers have sort of led out. But I had a blast. I learned so much, and I still actually keep in touch with a couple of guys that I was there with, athletic trainers that I was there with. It's weird to see these guys now. Some of the guys I worked with who are now retired, and seeing them like as actors and stuff. I'm like, well, I knew that guy before he was this cheesy, So, but it's pretty cool to sit there and I mean, and I'll always be a Kansas City Chiefs fan. They gave me the opportunity in the NFL. The Clark Hunt and the Hunt family are incredible owners. I got to meet him once, which was, he's one of the most down to earth people you can meet. So it's pretty cool to be involved in that and see it from a family standpoint, which is nice.
It would be pretty cool to see behind the scenes.
Yeah.
One day I hope to do that with Pete Carroll. He's coming on the show.
Yeah.
I'm a big Seahawks fan.
Fair enough.
And so in the very first episode of this podcast, we're talking about it was just me and Carl.
Yeah. Okay.
We're talking about goals for the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want Pete Carroll on the show.
Sure.
I love Pete Carroll.
Sure. I feel like that's not that tall of an ask. I feel like he's the kind of guy that would just he would just stroll up and sit down and be like, "What are we talking about today?" Yeah. Just keep nagging. Just keep sending emails. Pete.c@seahawks.com.
And he's such a charismatic, like entertaining guy too in interviews.
Oh yeah.
You see guys like Belichick and even Andy Reid is shitty.
Andy Reid. Well,
it's all one word monotone answers. Like
my favorite for coaching interviews is the NHL.
Yeah,
like because those guys are just deadpan into we got to work better on forecheck's got to be better, and we just didn't play right. Yeah. You got to get better. Like, sounds boring. You're gonna lull me into not caring. I guess it's the genius of being a hockey coach. You just lull them and nobody cares anymore. I
was watching a post-game interview of Belichick yesterday, and they're like, "What do you think of Tom Brady?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's a great quarterback." That's it. You're like, okay. Yeah. And then someone's like,
"He's not wrong, though. He's not wrong."
Yeah. They're like, "What do you expect from the Rams in 2 weeks?" And he's like, "Oh, well, they're a great team."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's the point of this interview?
Yeah, there's been some good ones. Yeah, I love watching stuff like that because you know what's going on in his mind, right? And he's the amount of times you've seen, like, it's like the whole Marshawn Lynch thing, right? I'm only here so I don't pay a fine. They're just kind of there because they have to be. He's like, yeah, great quarterback, yeah, great team, yeah, okay.
Do you remember back?
What's that?
Do you remember back to when you were a kid?
No.
And it wasn't that long ago. But I watched a lot of sports as a kid.
Yeah.
A lot of basketball.
Yeah.
NFL too. But like you'd see the post game interviews, and no matter how dumb the responses were, you're just like, oh, that guy's the man.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Like a Marshawn Lynch interview.
I would still
like,
do
that is amazing. Whereas right now you're like, I'm way smarter than that guy.
No, well, but that's a different story, right?
Yeah.
You can be smarter. You can think you're better than, but that guy's still the man. Come on. I mean, but those Marshawn Lynch, there was a genius, a beauty to what he said, and I loved every second of it.
So
when you have a guy that does that, I love it. When you like I said, we go back to Terrell, and when Terrell Owens sort of went off the handle. Even still, I mean, he throws a hissy fit because he didn't make the first. He wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to show up. And, oh man, this is great. You know.
Do you remember his interview in his driveway, not wearing a shirt, doing bicep curls and sit-ups while he's getting interviewed?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think my favorite quote. I do it I say it all the time. I think it's stolen from Marshawn Lynch. Where you're talking. I think it's how you going to pay for all the fines. I think it's Marshall's like straight cash, homie. I love that. I love it. So when people talk to me, say, how do you want to pay? Straight cash, homie. It doesn't matter what I buy. A pack of gum at 7-Eleven, straight cash, homie. You go buying $1,000 of the oysters for an event, straight cash, homie. Like, no, I actually put it on my card. I don't have that.
Okay, let's fast forward.
Yeah.
Outside of university.
Yep.
Come back to Vancouver. How do you get into the restaurant industry?
So we're not back in Vancouver yet.
Okay.
So after grad school, I moved down to Washington D.C. and I work at a university down there, and
in sports med.
In sports medicine, yeah. And my circle of friends are friends of friends from Vancouver, and we just hit it off down there. We were actually they're my best friends now. And they have friends who, the head chef and the assistant GM of a raw bar. And so it's Thanksgiving down there. They bring some oyster. Hey, Scott, do you want to know how to shuck an oyster? Yeah. So I can say I've shucked an oyster, It's just one other thing I can say I've done.
So hold on. I just want to make sure that these historical facts are correct.
Yeah.
At this point in your life, you'd never shucked an oyster.
I've never shucked an oyster.
And you were post grad school, so I'm saying you're going to be like 24.
Post grad school, so I don't know, 26.
26. Okay.
Yeah, because I did 2 bachelor degrees.
Okay.
So yeah, I was about 26, 27 years old. I shucked my first oyster.
That's 2 more than me.
Yeah. Yeah, so I shucked my oyster. I shucked an oyster, and they were like, "Hey, you're not bad at this." So a year goes by, another Thanksgiving, and they're like, "Have you been practicing?" I'm like, "No, you're pretty good." And what's more important to oyster shucking than the ability to be able to open an oyster is the ability to be able to talk to a wall and have a good time, right? It's the personality behind the bar that's more important. And so I was like, well, yeah, I'll come out. And they said, you should come out and try to see if you like it. So I came out and I worked my first shift. It's like Tuesday happy hour, and I shucking next to the head shucker and start doing it. And I put 1 oyster down for his 12. You know what I mean? I'm not helping. I'm probably hurting it more than I'm helping, but it's slow, so who cares? And then I started doing more and more shifts. I started picking up more and more shifts. I started wanting to do more and more and more and more and more. And I got quicker, and I started watching. Like I did with Spark. You watch videos. I watched videos of other guys who were championship shuckers and watched how they shucked. And I sort of picked it up, and I kept practicing and started doing it until I was the one who was doing the dozen oysters for somebody else's one, and it became, I love this. I love to be able. The first thing I loved was not having to tell people bad news. Hey, sorry, your ACL's torn, your season's over. I went from that to being like, yeah, let's have drinks and eat some oysters, guys. And I really loved the place I worked for. I worked for the Rappahannock Oyster Company down in Washington, D.C. They're out of Virginia. And I loved the people that I worked with had such a passion for what they did. There was such a pride in the food that they were putting out and the specials that they were putting out that it really appealed to me. That was where we get to that competition where these guys, they did something great. They weren't going to rest. They weren't going to rest. They were going to make better. What's the next thing that we can do? How can we make it better? The head chef would come out with this dish, and he'd be like, "It's good, but it can be better." And everybody else would be having this is the greatest thing I've ever had in my entire life. I love this. This is the best food. And so I worked for them for a long time, and then visa expired, so I came back to Vancouver and started working part time at a restaurant. Started working part time at a restaurant, and I worked construction because I did that in school. I painted walls, and Then it got out of construction. There's a little bit of a hiatus in construction, so I started shucking full time, and then I learned how to bartend, and everything sort of progressed from there. Where I became a competition shucker, and started doing that. And first competition, shit the bed, just completely shit the bed, fucked everything up, forgot how to shuck an oyster while I was up there. and then it's sort of like it progressed. You get a little bit more comfortable, nerves do more and more and more, and you get a little bit more successful running raw bars and going from doing like one oyster for the guy's 12 to being the guy who does a majority of a 600 to 1,000 oyster happy hour. Like that was where I was happy. So you get this whiteout and you're in the shit, and there's 300 oysters that need to come out, and you're just head down blasting oysters, and it was fun. And that sort of became that other side of the competition, was one, not only how do I shuck, how am I not the best at where I am right now? How am I not the best shucker for the location I'm at? I want to be the best shucker in the city. I want to be the best shucker in the West Coast, Canada, whatever. Regardless of if that's true or not, that's the what I aspire to, hopefully one day eventually. And if there's any other shuckers listening, I'm gonna get text lighting my phone up. Hey, I heard what you said, you idiot. Come after me now. But that's the meatheadedness of oyster shuckers. Because a lot of oyster shuckers were athletes at some point in time. It's some degree. A lot of them were a lot of hockey players from back east. Down in the eastern parts of the United States, a lot of lacrosse players or football players. These guys, shuck some oysters, it's fun. Free beer at the end of the night. But so that became sort of where it was, and I eventually got to the point where I sat down and I thought about the way the culinary world works, and you had a lot of chefs who would brand themselves, and they branded themselves as they themselves were the brand. So they built restaurants off of what they did, and there's whole personas. Even bartenders. You have a lot of bartenders who became public figures based off of what they can do. I mean, you've got guys who do that flair bartending, or guys who are mixologists who are doing some of those incredible things. And you can go, if you're in the know, as a patron, you say, I'm going to go to so-and-so's restaurant. Oh my God, I heard he's great. And it becomes a household name. And for me, there's enough in oysters that there's no reason why an oyster shucker couldn't do that either. Why can't the oyster shucker be an entity like a bartender, like a chef? Because what we do is so specialized that if you get to that point, if you're a good shucker, why not be able to brand yourself? And so that's what the idea of Big Shucker came out with. And originally it was just going to be like, I'm just going to hang out and be a public figure for oysters. And then it was like, no, let's see what we can do. And that's when the idea of doing a traveling raw bar sort of came about. Was let's do a little bit for myself.
Where did your knowledge of the oyster come in? Oh. You shucked your first oyster at age 26. Yep. How do you go from that to being like one of the most knowledgeable people in the country about oysters?
It's a lot of research, and I don't. That's a tricky thing. There's a lot of guys who know a lot about oysters. I don't think that what I know is. I didn't say you were the most knowledgeable. One of the.
Although you're probably my favorite that is in that list.
I'll take that then. No, So there's a lot of nerds. There's a lot of nerds out there, and it's the same thing when you for oysters as it is for anything. You have guys who will figure out, will read books, or I guess write books first, so that other guys can read books. And I made trips to oyster farms. I went to trips oyster farms down in the States. I meet the farmers, talk to the farmers, always ask questions. Going back to that comment, that wanting to be better is. For me, wasn't just, okay, what's the best oyster shucker, but how do I make these oysters, how do I put them in the spotlight? How do I say, an oyster isn't just an oyster? And so it became a lot of reading, a lot of talking to people, a lot of having conversations, trying to constantly learn more and more and more and more about how oysters are, what they are, how to make them better, or not how to make them better, but how to present them better, how to tell people. And part of what I love about oyster shucking is when people come up and say, oh, I don't like oysters. Well, why don't you like oysters? Well, I had bad oysters. Okay, well, or not even I had bad oysters. I don't like I don't like they're slimy. Well, do you like mangoes? Well, yeah, it was like texture of an overripe mango. No, it's not. So, or avocado. Well, no, it's not. I said, well, yes, it is. It's like a slimy. It's not a slimy. It's a salty version of that. It's a wet, salty version of that. I'm like, no way. And then they have it. Oh my God, this is incredible. So I can't do that without first being able to say, this is the anatomy of an oyster, which I think comes from the sports medicine background. This is the anatomy of an oyster. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And this is what's going to happen if I learn the anatomy of the oyster, how they're farmed, why they're farmed, what terroir is versus terroir, and terroir meaning in oysters, and then how does that affect your experience as a consumer on how you take these oysters in. So there was a logical chain for me to sit there and say, here's A, here's B. How do I fill in what's in between? And how do I cater that for the expert lover? How do I cater that to the novice? And how do I cater that for the person who hates oysters? Can we get somebody who hates oysters to potentially like oysters? So it drove me into doing a lot of research, a lot of conversation, a lot of talking to people, asking questions. I mean, when I was in sports medicine, and even now, when if people come in, and when I was in the restaurant and asking me a question, or somebody new in the industry is, hey, listen, you're going to fuck up. You're going to make mistakes. Do it. Make mistakes. What's the worst that can happen? Right? When I was doing sports medicine, when I was talking to students, make mistakes because I'm here to stop anything bad from happening. In the restaurant industry, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody doesn't get their food right. It's not the end of the world. I guess you can argue, oh, well, they might get something they're allergic to. Okay, well, fair enough. But the chances of that happening are pretty low. Make mistakes.
If they're ordering oysters, they probably know they're not allergic to shellfish.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised the amount of people who come into the restaurant. They're like, oh yeah. So can I get you anything? No, I'm okay. I'm just here with my partner or my friend or whatever it may be. And oh, okay. I'm actually allergic to oysters. Why are you here? Like, why are they such an asshole that they're bringing you to the place where you could die?
Newsflash, your partner doesn't want you around anymore.
Yeah. It's like really nice of them to bring you to the place where you could die. You could choke. Your throat could close up because of the allergens that are in the room. That's real cool. So, I mean, I always say, well, do you have your EpiPen on you? Well, no. Get out of here. Like, you're not even welcome here. Just go home.
You need to leave.
Yeah, we've kicked people out for that. I've kicked people out. It's not worth it. Get out of here. Not worth it. So go get your EpiPen, come back.
I think you and I think similarly in the way that when I started my career in real estate, of course, people are asking me questions that I don't know. But I early on learned that I wanted to be the guy that whenever someone asked me a question, I gave them so much useful information that they didn't have any more questions. And that's the way that I thought about it in my head. So like relaying it back to your industry, someone asks you like, what's the proper way to eat an oyster or whatever.
Yeah.
You give them, your answer is so thorough that they're just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It takes them like 5 or 6 minutes to actually comprehend what you're saying. And so they don't have any more questions because you've given them so much useful information. So that's the way that I thought about it in my industry, is that I wanted to know so much about real estate, construction, design, all of that.
Yeah.
That when somebody asks me a question, I just give them so much information that they don't have any more questions.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. It's how is the oyster farmed? What does it come from? What makes an oyster an oyster?
Mm-hmm.
And you have those answers. It's exactly like I said. What's the design? What's the construction? What's the benefits? What's the cost or whatever? I don't fucking know what you do. What's on either side of this? That's when you have the answers, it's fun. I still like it when people come and they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. And I'll sit there and I'll be showing. It's a good question. I don't know. Like I'll find out next time you see me. I'll have an answer for you. Yeah. I just hope they never see me again. I've given them enough booze to that point in time. That's a question they only ask once and they never ask again. But no, yeah. It's I think to have the answers, especially. I mean, I think we're. With a very broad stroke, we're dealing with fears. I think both you and I. Yours is a fear of making a commitment, either from a money standpoint or a timing standpoint, and mine's the fear of something icky. So a very strong. Like, and how do we take that fear away from people and say, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. This is better than you think it's going to be. So. I think that's part of it, and then we can't make that. We can't make those broads, or we can't reassure people if we don't know. So, yeah.
I think it was the second time I met you.
Okay.
At Fanny Bay.
Okay.
I think it maybe third. I'd only met you a couple times, and it was really just like an introduction.
Yeah.
It was Alex being like, "Hey, this is Scotty Wolf."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Is his last name actually Wolf?"
Yeah,
He's like, "No, it's not."
No, wasn't that? I think Scotty Wolf was an actor too, wasn't it? Back in like the late '90s. There, I think that's where it might have come from. I don't know though.
So Fanny Bay, we come in with like a group of 8 dudes.
Yep.
It's our whiskey night.
Yep.
We go have a bunch of. Actually, the server recommended this Weller whiskey, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, Mikey. I sent Mikey over there to take care of you guys. And I told him, so they're normally into Scotch. They're here. I'm the one at that point in time. I was the one who making a lot of decisions for the bar. I said these guys have had all the Scotch that's on the bar, Talisker 10 and Bowmore and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I don't think they're bourbon guys. So yeah, he came over and said, sell them on Wellers. And so, I mean, I love, like, I came over right after that. I was like, Wellers is my favorite. Every time I go to a liquor store, I buy another bottle. And I think it's gone up 50 cents since I've told you that. So my investments are paying off.
But it's just like, what is Wellers? Do you know?
Wellers is a bourbon. I believe what I was told is a Weller Reserve. I think it's in Willer LaRue, W.L. Weller, Willer LaRue Weller. Well, William LaRue Weller would be better. It wasn't. Both first and last name wasn't Weller. But William LaRue Weller, I think, is his name. And the story I was told was that it's the bourbon that doesn't make it into the Pappy casks. So it's the same bourbon. It just doesn't go into the casks that are earmarked for Pappy Van Winkle. It's the stuff that becomes Weller. Now, that's what I was told. I found more. So
it's not aged?
Oh, it is aged. Yeah, it's got to be aged. So it just goes into different barrels. It doesn't go into the same barrels. So like bourbon has to be I think it's virgin oak. Okay. Virgin oak, I believe, for bourbon. 51% corn mash, I believe. There's all these little things in it that make it bourbon compared to American whiskey or Tennessee whiskey or Scotch, whatever it is, all the whole whiskey family, what makes it bourbon. But yeah, it's definitely aged. It's just done differently. You know what I mean? And Weller's, like I said, it's an incredibly smooth, great bourbon that people just haven't found out about. She probably should cut this out completely so that there's more on the shelves for us. Let's not talk about Weller in the podcast.
Hard to find.
It is.
After that night, I went to 3 liquor stores to try to find it.
Yeah.
None of them had it.
Yeah. It's weird because you'll go to a liquor store and you'll see that they've got 3 different types of it.
Like well, they had it earlier that day, but Scotty was in there earlier that day and bought all 6 bottles that they had. Yeah.
I mean, I basically have I think at this point in time it's a Weller bar. I think if people from Weller are listening, I don't know who owns it, Buffalo Trace, Centauri Beam, I'm not sure. But if you're listening, I'm a great brand ambassador for Weller. So.
Scotty's on speed dial with like BCLC, and as soon as they get a case in, they're calling Scotty and be like, "Hey, we got 12. Do you want them?" He's like, "Yeah." And then 30 seconds later, he's posting them on Amazon for like $80 because they're what are they, 50?
No. There's not a market. They're available. No, I'm not doing that kind of stuff. I'm not. One day, hopefully, they bump up. If they increase by 100%, it's worth it. But if I don't drink it before then, so. But yeah, so that was
okay. What I was getting at though was the day that we went to Fanny Bay. Just it was really cool to see. Because I love people that are passionate about what they do, but it was cool to see how passionate and excited you were to be able to explain the entire oyster experience to us. Because for me coming in, I don't know if I told you this, I'd had oysters once in my life before that.
Okay.
And it was at Place and Kits on Chewy's.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
So they were good oysters right there, right?
Oh yeah, Chewy's is great. I do. I love the Chewy's guys. I know the Chewy's guys well. I actually judged one of their shucking competitions, so I love Chewy's.
But I had no explanation. And coming in brand new, I didn't know what the hell. Like, to me, it's like, oh, yeah, it's a slimy, salty thing.
Yeah.
So to hear your, like, excited, passionate explanation of an oyster was so cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's difficult for me not to get excited about that. Like, we talk about being a nerd and all that kind of stuff. And oysters are the things that I find, there's I think a lot that I find exciting. And I think I'm very excitable. Maybe that'll be the 4th thing I am is excitable, to tie it back to the very beginning. But there's a lot of things that I get excited for. I genuinely enjoy. And oysters is definitely one of them. I mean, it became a passion over the course of like 5 years of me. Now I love oysters. the single most important business decision I've ever made, and I think it's easy to get lost in that. It's easy to sit there and say and get excited and tell people, and when people hear me get excited, they get excited about it too. So it's sort of a happy coincidence of being that excited guy talking about how special oysters are. So yeah, and I think like we talked about before, to sit there and say to explain it debunks a lot of those myths. And when people don't have an excuse anymore, you take away all their excuses. Like, I'm not going to do this because it's slimy. Well, it's not slimy. You're going to taste the salt. Well, I don't like the texture. It's like snot. I said, well, no, it's actually like an overripe mango or avocado. No, it's not. I'll give it a try. I don't like it because it's like, one of the funniest things is when I was in D.C., I used to have a group of people who were vegan come in and eat oysters. No central nervous system, no real 3-chambered heart that pumps blood around. It basically just helps with filtration and stuff like that. And they would come in and they have oysters.
Vegans will eat oysters.
This is where...
this group of vegans will eat oysters.
Well, that's it. Apparently it splits the vegan community.
Interesting.
So every time somebody came by and would start talking to me about I don't eat them, I'm vegetarian. I said, well, they're vegan. Well, no, they're not. There's no central nervous. Don't feel pain. There's no essence of being. There's no soul. There's no, like, they are essentially fly traps of the ocean that just eat algae. They go, oh, no, that's not true. And then all of a sudden, every now and then, you have somebody come back like, you know what, I did it. You're right. These things are vegan. And then you have other people like, you know what, it's not. They're not vegan. They'll never be vegan. Screw you. And
what's their argument for not being vegan?
They're still creatures. They're still animals.
They're alive?
Yes. But I mean,
a plant is alive.
Listen, man, we could go through a whole. This is Denny's philosophical hour.
We could have it once a week on this.
Just a round table about send out some ideas and bring in a bunch of guys who have no idea what they're talking about, who don't observe vegan, and be like, well, we're the best at explaining this. Yeah.
So the biggest excuse or complaint to not being vegan was that it's alive?
Yeah. So, but I mean, to each their own, right? I'm not the kind of person who's going to go in. The only thing I don't, when I do my catering, when I have any aspect of oysters, and I will shame people, is cocktail sauce. I have no cocktail sauce. And people, I love cocktail sauce. I don't care you love cocktail sauce. Cocktail sauce is ketchup. You're putting ketchup with a mixture of horseradish on a fresh piece of fish, if you want to argue about why would you do that. You get a lot of people from down south, like the Gulf of Mexico oysters tend to be a little bit bigger, so if they grow faster in the warmer waters, they don't have the time to develop that same flavor profile, so you sort of hide it a little bit with cocktail sauce. And the way I always used to explain to them, so, oh, can we get cocktails? No. Well, you don't have to be an asshole. So, well, but I am an asshole, so it helps. But anyways, I would sit there and I would explain to them, I said, listen, where are you from? I said, we're from Texas. It'd be like me coming into a steak restaurant and saying, hey, can I get HP? Can I get a well-done steak HP? Yeah. So, and they'd be like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, that makes sense. And there's other people like, I just really like the taste of cocktail sauce. I can't argue with that. If you tell me you really like cocktail sauce, sure. If you're like, oh, I just have always had it with them. I was like, well, no, let's try it without it. So that's the only time I'm really that much of a jerk about things I don't want to do with it. But yeah, let's listen to what the fears are, right? And let's listen to the sliminess, to the it's a creature, whatever it may be. And you have people like, oh, well, when I put lemon on, I saw it quiver. It's impossible. It doesn't do that. It's not a scallop. Scallops do that, but oysters don't. I swear, it almost just jumped out of the shell. I was like, it didn't, and to be able to have sort of that conversation and realize that, and I mean, I've shucked hundreds of thousands of oysters. And
do you have any idea what that number would be?
So we did a rough estimate. At one point. One of my bosses at Fanny Bay said I've shucked about 1 million. And I don't think I'm there yet. And
that's in 5 years.
That's in 5 years. I think I'm somewhere in.
You just told us his age.
30.
He's 31, Carl.
I'm 30. Just turned 32, Carl. Yeah. So I started shucking. Or what? So I think I'm somewhere in like the 700,000 oyster range right now. So I got a ways to go. But I've done a lot of oysters. I've shucked a lot of oysters.
So Carl, do you like oysters? Fuck Carl. So as someone who is uneducated in the oyster world, but has now had oysters 3 times in my life, which is a little bit embarrassing to say, but every time I have them, they're better than they were before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because my mindset is I'm more excited about them every time.
I think that's probably part of it. I think that you're now seeking them out.
Yes.
Before they were there, now you're like, you know what, I want oysters.
I was intimidated by them before.
Yep. Yeah.
What is the correct way to prepare an oyster when you're eating it? So it's open face. It's on the platter of ice. It comes to you at your table. You've got 6 or 12 or whatever around you. You've got all this shit in the middle. You've got a hot sauce bottle. You've got horseradish. You've got a lemon.
Yeah, you got mignonette. You've got cocktail sauce, for argument's sake. You got all of these things. You got maybe different types of...
No, fuck cocktail sauce.
All right,
we already talked about that.
We'll take that off the plate. What's the right way to do it? So, and there is no right or wrong way. It's however you enjoy it. And that's I think where you get that pretentiousness taken away, that pretentiousness of French cuisine almost. Like this is the only way you can do it. For me, it's however you like it. Like people ask me, what's the best thing to pair with oysters when you're drinking? Whatever you like, to be honest. As long as there's a percentage on the bottle, we're cool. You know what I mean? Because you have that traditional white wine and oysters or champagne, bubbles and oysters are the classic pairings. But there's nothing wrong with going down to the beach with a couple beer and drinking some maybe oysters and stout. Is the Irish way, you know, but having some beer at the beach with some oysters out of a cooler, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with doing an oyster luge with scotch. We just sort of takes all that, like similar to what you do with a marrow luge. Take all that extra, that brininess that's in the shell and shoot all that back with some scotch. I mean, there's something beautiful to be said about whatever you like. I mean, you can't have a tannic red. There's people who do have tannic reds. They love it. So it just sort of depends on what your thought process, how you enjoy food. And who am I to tell you that you're doing it wrong if that's the way you enjoy it? Unless it's cocktail sauce.
I was hoping you'd say that. I was waiting for it. I was like, I'm thinking of a question to encourage this answer, but you just got
unless it's cocktail sauce. That's the only way you're not allowed it if it's cocktail sauce. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's guys who are now doing like incredible things. And this is where I sort of get torn. There's some guys who are doing beautiful things with oyster recipes where they're putting it. I've got a buddy who does it with a almost like a dill oil and champagne with a creme fraiche. It's beautiful. It tastes delicious. But I'm a little bit of a purist. I like the oyster. Does it hide the
oyster though?
You're going to lose some of the oyster and caviar flavor.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I can do it. I will do it. I have done it. It depends on what the client wants out of it. But for me, caviar and oysters are good by themselves. You know, there's no reason to hide that flavor or to make it more, or to take away from it and create this thing that doesn't need to be. But at the same point in time, I've had some incredible experiences that have this other side of it too. So,
okay, I want to talk a bit about Big Shucker.
Sure.
And I guess where and how the idea came up. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but like I want to know what went into starting the business.
Yeah. So
you've been working at restaurants for a while. You've been shucking a shit ton of oysters.
Yeah.
And you're like, I want to do my own thing.
I want to do my own thing. So I wanted to. The one thing that was rough about Vancouver from coming back from Washington D.C., the DMV area, is a lot of the shuckers down there are owned or are their own separate entities. Like they're not owned by a restaurant per se. Where you shuck for Rappahannock, that's all you shuck for. You shuck for Old Ebbitt Grill, and that's the only guy you shuck for. These guys move around.
It's like an independent contractor.
It's similar, yeah. I mean, you might have a home base. You might be you might be the guy. You might be Rappahannock Shucker, but
it's like a DJ almost.
Yeah,
you get hired for like so you work every Friday and Saturday night for 4 months or whatever.
And then you can get a phone call. The restaurant can get a phone call from a different restaurant and be like, hey, we need somebody. We're short. Do you have anybody? And you can get sent over to work for somebody else or do a pop-up at a beer garden or do however it may be, however you want to take a look at it. That's something that can be done. And when I got here, I found that the culture was a little bit more closed off. If you were a Rodney's guy, you're a Rodney's guy. If you were a Chewy's guy, you were a Chewy's guy. If you were a Fanny Bay guy, you were a Fanny Bay guy. And we all got together and hung out and drank at the competitions and at parties and stuff like that. But we were never anything but that thing that we were, and it wasn't good enough for me. And the culture in Vancouver, honestly, is lacking quite a bit. There's festivals down there. I shucked this thing down in DC called the Oyster Riot. And the Oyster Riot is a 50,000 oyster event, so it's all you can drink, all you can eat, and you show up, and there's probably 25 to 35 different oysters from different farms from around the world, and you basically just line up and walk your way around. It goes oyster farm brewery, oyster farm winery, and you just walk around and you get hammered and you drink. So I'm sitting there shucking this thing, and it opened my eyes to the potential that oysters have. Now I've come back to Vancouver, where you have all these people here, and it's right there, it's at our fingertips. And I find that we've, especially in Vancouver, get a little lackadaisical when it comes to this kind of stuff, where it's so available to us all the time that we sort of take it for granted. And the oyster community is a little bit lacking. We don't have 15 oyster houses. We've got six places that are oyster houses, not places that are restaurants that do oysters, but 6 raw bars, 6 oyster houses. And so when I came in, I was like, well, how do we change the culture? And I'm not going to change the restaurant industry in Vancouver, like by working at a restaurant. So if I can change it, I can give a new experience to a consumer, then why not try that? So I talked to some buddies back east, and one of the big components for me doing this was actually, he's a competitor now, but I went out and visited Jesse with Wandering Mollusk. And he was doing it he was shucking oysters at Yellow Dog and at Parkside out in Port Moody. And I took the SkyTrain out there, met him, had some beers with him, hung out. We hung out all day, all night, talked about the business, talked about what he saw, what his ideas for it were, talked about business licensing and catering versus any other aspect, and how to make it work. And we ended up going to Rodney's, and I don't remember getting home that night, So it was a true oyster shucker experience with this guy, where you don't remember a lot. But it was sort of then and there, after talking to him, I was like, you know what, let's do this. Let's add something else to, not because competition is good. If there's only one guy doing it, what's the purpose, And on the other side of that, why not have more guys do it, make it more available, and change the way that people see oysters in Vancouver? So whether it be it shucking at a brewery, or going up to the interior, shucking at a winery, or doing it at a convention, doing it weddings, birthday parties, sort of whatever it may be, and providing different experiences for each venue, for each type of event. So there's shucking. So I'm shucking a Super Bowl party in a couple of weeks. It's a small party. It's for some people who just want oysters at their Super Bowl party.
I just say I love that the oyster industry. I love that the oyster industry has its own adjective. Just like, no matter what, it's just shucking. As soon as you hear that word, you're like, I know it's oysters.
Unless you're in the Midwest, and then it's corn, right? So, but for the most part, yeah, that's pretty much what it is, right?
I love that.
So, yeah.
This guy, my buddy, was shucking over here. I was shucking over there.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. I mean, and then now, like, because I've been to a couple competitions, I've met some of the guys from around the world. Like, I didn't meet the guy who was wearing it, but I had one of my hats I gave to a guy named Eamon Clark. Eamon Clark's, I think, arguably the best oyster shucker ever. Like he is the Tom Brady of oyster shucking. No, he's in a world of his own. Like, when I say no, but
what's his name?
Eamon Clark.
Okay, we need to get him on the podcast, Carl.
Yeah, I'll give him a call for you.
Eamon Clark.
Get him to call in. We'll do a live podcast. He'll rip me apart.
Where's he from?
He's from Toronto. He works for. You know Rodney. You know Rodney's.
Yep.
Rodney is Eamon's dad. So
let's just go down to Rodney's and get hammered one night.
Not the Vancouver Rodney's, the one in Toronto, and the one in Calgary is what his family owns. His family
got to take a plane.
Yeah, I'll make the introduction. He is the guy that I aspire to be. He's a true professional through and through. Like he will go out and he will take care of the people who come into town who are oyster lovers. He'll meet oyster shuckers at the airport and take you out for breakfast. You'll crash on his couch. Like, that's the beauty of the oyster industry, is that it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and if somebody comes to town, we're all getting together, we're all hanging out. So it makes it pretty cool because. So, but anyways, to go back, so there's some guys I've haven't met yet, or guys I have met. I know the guy who is he was the former Danish champ. I've known guys who are Canadian champs, U.S. champs, all over the place, all over the world. I've met these guys, and it's incredible to have like this, as big as the world is. You can go to some of these coastal towns and be like, "Hey, I'm an oyster shucker. Oh, you have your knife on you? Yeah. Hop on behind the bar, bud."
Do you carry a knife at all times? What do you call the?
I just oyster shucking knife, oyster shucking tool. It sort of depends. I generally have one on me most times. I less so now that I'm not in the restaurant every day, but I know exactly where they are. I have a box, or when you walk, I don't know if I might be making this up, like this happens only in my head, but you go to somebody's house and they've got a collection of something, and it just opens up, and as the case opens, you like, it sort of twinkles a little bit, you get like that angelic sort of chiming that comes through. That's how I feel about my knives. I open up this box and there's like 15 of them sitting there, and I'm just like, these are my toys, these are mine, and it's weird. It's really weird, but I guess we're all weirdos when it comes to being oyster nerds. So we all like our knife, and it's weird because it's all muscle memory. So we get there and we start shucking oysters, and we're popping these things, and we can feel from two knives that we sort of file down or shape or get made for us, we can tell the difference. They can be made the exact same way. They will have different feels. Like it's so finicky. It's so minute. The muscle memory is so incredible. And now I make us all sound like we're incredible athletes. Like we're all throwing like 98-mile-an-hour fastballs, like dead center. That's not what it is. But I mean, there is something like when you get to that level of shucking, the oysters feel different, and you can sort of sense and sort of feel how they're shucking day to day, which is kind of cool. So
it's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear more about Big Shucker.
Okay.
So one thing that excites me is just like the figure it out mentality of any entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So you see this niche in the market that Greater Vancouver sucks for individual oyster shucking businesses. I think that it's sorry, maybe I displayed that incorrectly, but it's more centralized into locations. Like you're the Rodney's guy, you're the Chewy's guy, blah 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 blah. So you see this idea of this traveling person that can go to different events and venues and ideas, but what are the next few things that you do
to get from the idea to putting it down?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are the steps that you go through from going from, I think this would be a really good idea, to showing up at your first event with your cool fucking truck?
Yeah.
And a shit ton of oysters.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to what makes a shucker to begin with. It's the ability to be able to talk to that wall and have a good time. So we generally end up being the I don't want to say the life of the party every time, but a lot of people like hanging out with the shuckers. We're the ones who will out drink the bartenders. You know what I mean? Because this is what we do. You don't shuck oysters without a drink. You know what I mean? It's just weird. It's weird if you're sober shucking oysters. So the first thing I wanted to, even before I thought about this, was how do we change the perception? How do we change the culture in Vancouver? How does Vancouver get a 50,000 oyster event right in the backyard of oysters? How do we get that event going? How do we get that going? So that was sort of the idea in if we can bring this outside of the raw bars, if we can get this away from Chewy's, Rodney's, Fanny Bay, Forte's, Wild Tail. How do we get that into the forefront? How do we get people thinking about oysters on a more regular basis? And so that was the first thing I wanted to address. The second thing I addressed was what we talked about before, is developing a culture or a branding for shuckers. I mean, why? If you love your oyster shucker, I mean, I'm not saying that we should be celebrities. That's not it at all. But why not be like, oh yeah, Scotty's he's the shucker. Like Eamon, he's my shucker. I go to him all the time. I go to Mike Gill. I go to John Merrill. I go to David Burns. I go to all these guys. Chris Minocchio.
I've never heard of any of them other than Scotty.
Yeah. Well, these guys are all.
You must be the best.
No. You had them 3 times. That's all. You don't know. You don't have the trading cards yet, right? And So it was like how do we take what some of these guys have done, or how do we take what these guys have branded themselves, and how do we take it to the next level? So develop a brand, develop a logo, develop something that somebody recognizes when they think about oysters. I see that logo, I want that guy to shuck for me. I want this image at my wedding. I want this image at my birthday party. When I die, I want to have a cheers of oysters to me based off of who this is. And so a lot of it was the networking. So how do we talk to people? Logistics. How do I get my oysters? How do I transport my oysters? How do I make sure I'm satisfying everything that all the health boards want me to satisfy? How do I make sure it's a safe product that I'm giving to people? How do I all the logistics of making an event, to how do I get paid? If I'm doing a pop-up, how do I get paid? Where do I take my money? Do I do cash only? To how do I price this? What's my value in shucking? What's the oyster's value plus my value? What is that worth? And so there's a lot of little factors that sort of played into the brainstorm and construction of Big Shucker Traveling Raw Bar. And
where do you go for that info? Because it didn't necessarily exist in BC.
Yeah, I think you draw parallels. You draw a lot of parallels with catering companies. So what's the difference between a guy shucking oysters or somebody doing a charcuterie board for 100 people? Or
I don't know if this is offensive or not, but
let's hear it.
Like, do you compare yourself to a food truck at all? Like,
oh, it's not offensive. I'm a caterer.
Okay.
I am a caterer. I'm not doing anything out of my truck. My truck's just basically transportation to and from.
Okay.
And then I got the one I did because it fits everything and it looks really cool.
Okay.
I guess for people who are out there, I have a 52 Chevy panel that's bright yellow right now. If you see me driving around Vancouver, give me a honk. There's only one of them out there. So if you see it, definitely stop by. I mean, say hi if you see me around too. We'll do shameless. I'll do a shameless plug now as well at the end. Big Shucker on social media, Facebook and Instagram.
Just reach a big one
out
at the end.
Yeah, just roll. And anybody, reach out if you have questions. I get a lot of questions actually. What some of these guys. So what Jesse did for me when he sat down and talked to me and said, "This is what I want to do," or when I said, "This is what I want to do," and he said, "Well, think about this, think about that." Business licenses were one thing that came up, and I've said this a lot. It's for a long time in Vancouver, it was easier to sell marijuana illegally than it was to sell an oyster legally. And that was crazy to me. And I think a lot of people with liquor find it the same way. It's easier to sell marijuana illegally than it is to sell alcohol legally because of the amount of hoops and paperwork and stuff that you need to jump through. I think that, and this is probably going to piss off the government, so I don't know if I should say it, but alcohol in...
Who gives a shit? The NDP sucks right now.
the alcohol, making alcohol work in BC is antiquated. It's an antiquated laws that we're working with. I mean, the fact that there's so many people who got shut down, balls taken away, or it's so hard to get a liquor license makes it very difficult. Now, I don't say the same to the same degree is true for oysters, but it's definitely a very monitored industry or subsect of restaurants. And when we look at it, not only is it Vancouver Coastal Health, Fraser Health, it is also the BC CDC as well as the CFIA that are all looking at the quality of oysters and when they should shut it down. Now, they want to shut down oysters right from the start. If somebody gets sick, it must be the oyster's fault. I can probably, I don't know if I don't have stats for this 100%, but I would venture to guess that more people died from romaine lettuce in 2018 than they did from oysters. Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't have any stats to prove it. I haven't looked up how many people have died from oysters, or I don't have the stat in my head of how many people died from romaine lettuce, but I'm pretty sure it's more. Same thing. I've never been sick from oysters. I've never been sick from having oysters. I've been sick from eating chicken. Probably more times than I can. Well, there's no more times than I can count. I've had like 2 sicknesses where I've been from chicken. But I know it's chicken. You know what I mean? Yeah. And over the course of 5 years, I've probably had just as many oysters as I've had like chicken nuggets in my life. So to be on that side of it, I can't remember the last time I had a chicken nugget, to be honest with you.
I think there's so many shuckers out there right now that are going to listen to this. They're going to be so pissed that you compared an oyster to a chicken nugget.
Well, no, yeah, right. I'm
Or you use the words in the same sentence.
comparing oysters to chicken. I'm saying that like I said, chicken I think makes people more sick. But if somebody is at a wedding and they've had oysters and chicken, the chicken could be not cooked right.
Right.
They're going to blame the oysters.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hoops, and it was very tricky for me to make sure I was crossing my T's and dotting my I's, and making sure that not only am I consistently sufficing what Vancouver Coastal Health wants, because ultimately if I don't do what they say, it's my fault. But the other side of it is making sure the insurance is in place and all that other kind of stuff. Now, I do think that I understand what they're there for. I do know that the health and safety is priority. I understand that. Would never put somebody and say, but I do think that we get to the point too in this city where we look at things that have been done for the past 200 years, say, you know what, that's not good enough. Well, it's been happening very few people have died in the last 200 years from this thing. I'm not just talking about oysters in general, or oysters specifically, but like I guess food and beverage in general as well, where they make things. I don't say they make things. They're doing what's best for the people, regardless of history, which I guess science is where we expand. I guess I'm getting a little technical and a little bit more. I feel like I'm getting more vague as I keep talking about this, because I don't want to step on any toes and make anybody mad at me. So I submit my next paperwork for my next event. They're like, oh no, no, you're not doing this.
One day I hope our reach is that big, Carl, that we can affect whether a business gets business or not. I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I'm next time I go to apply for a temporary permit to shuck oysters, like, I heard you on that podcast. You shit out of luck, kid.
One day it's going to be there.
I hope so. I hope you have me back on then when people listen to it.
Dude, 100%. Okay, let's get a little more
specific
then. You said branding early on was big.
Yeah.
I love the logo.
Thank you.
I love how it evolved. I know we talked a little bit about it, but where do you go from like branding, licenses? Now, how do I get events? How do I get into?
Yeah. So a lot of the events, right off the bat, are telling people. A lot of the events right off the bat are about networking.
Is it the unique factor too?
Oh, yes and no. I mean,
people probably haven't seen much of this, or if any, in Greater Vancouver.
That's true. Yeah. So when we sit there and we say, okay, this is what I'm an added benefit for most people, especially the way I've marketed myself in pop-up situations, is you give me a corner. I've made my own bar that I set up, and you don't have to worry about me. I'm taking my own payment. There's no extra work on your end. But what you're doing is you're advertising the fact that there is this entity that's at your place that is there for 1 or 2 days only, and it's just an added benefit for the people who come in. So part of it's that. The second part of it is selling myself. I need to sell myself, because we talked about the product. The product for Big Shucker isn't necessarily the oysters. I am the product. Why are you paying for me to be there versus anybody else? So when you look at it that way, I need to go into it understanding that I am the product, and you're purchasing my time, you're purchasing my entertainment for you, and we have this great conversation that usually happens because a lot of restaurateurs, a lot of people who are behind the bar have a lot of personalities, regardless if they're oyster shuckers or they're chefs or they're bartenders or they're servers or hosts. It doesn't matter. Busters. Everybody in the restaurant industry has a lot of personality. So I think a lot of it's going in and saying, hey, what do you think? And then somebody sees it, and it really is exponential. Somebody sees it. Oh, I want that at my wedding. Do you do weddings? Yeah, I do weddings. I would love that at my wedding because so and so didn't have it at their wedding. And you can almost have that sort of growth, or you can have like meeting you guys when you guys came in, and then John talking to me about shucking his Christmas party. So I go out there and I'm shucking for all the people who work in the building are coming out, and if one of those people calls me, it's worth it, because what do we do next? How do these people start thinking about oysters? Oh, you know what I really like? I'm doing a Super Bowl party. It'd be so cool to have oysters at my Super Bowl party. It'd be so cool to have oysters at my New Year's party. It'd be so my birthday. I'm having my 30, 40, 50, 60th birthday. I would love to have oysters at this. Like they're my favorite food. And so making myself available has been one of those things I've learned. Like always answer the phone no matter what. You know, never let it ring. Never let it run through to voicemail. Always turn my voicemails on. Everything's on silent over here. Make sure. But yeah, make sure that I'm always there. I'm always available. And I mean, it can be a little bit tiring. There's certain days where I don't want to have to be on. You know, it is my personality to turn it on. I show up, and let's be honest. It's not a facade I don't put on a mask. I get like a clown. I walk in, hey guys, how you doing? It's like this is me time to time. I'm sure I'm exhausting for people to hang around. Let's go do something, man. It's fun. But yeah, so that's. I think a lot of it to get jobs is that connection. How do I meet people? And I think the first couple people I met in the city were people that in the restaurant industry that I really respected, and becoming friends with them and listening to the way that they spoke and listening to the way they talked about the industry, and them knowing everybody is something that was huge. Like the job I wanted to work more than anything was I wanted to shuck oysters at Merchants on Commercial Drive before when it was the Oyster Bar. I would have worked for them even after they got out of the Oyster Bar. Now that they've closed down, they're now running DL Chicken and DL Burgers, which is fantastic. But Doug there was incredibly influential, somebody I respected. I respect the hell out of. Like, and he knows everybody. He's the mayor of Commercial Drive. I mean, he walks up and down. You can't walk a block. It doesn't take less than an hour. You know, he's just shaking hands and kissing babies the entire way up and down the street. And for me to see that, and for me to have, I guess, those mentors, role models, and guys that I was looking at in the industry was important. They were the ones who introduced me. Hey, Scotty, have you met so-and-so? And all of a sudden they're saying, hey, have you met so-and-so? And one of the guys that Doug introduced me to was Mark Sing-Song, who was on Top Chef. And then it turns out that the Top Chef guys were in PEI at the same seafood festival. So I'm seeing Mark all the time. So me and Mark were talking here, sit down, had a couple drinks, go for coffee when he's free, because he's a lot busier than I am. His time's a little bit more valuable than mine too. He's a true celebrity now. But you compare it to me meeting these guys, and then all of a sudden I'm in PEI, and I'm talking about all the shuckers, but then I'm going over and I'm able to say, hey, how you guys doing? It's nice to meet you, and meeting some of these chefs as well, and then talking with some of the shuckers who are chefs. And it was just always about networking. I went to Montreal after that trip, and I met up with a buddy named Jason Nagy out there, and we're talking about potentially doing some cool stuff out there and across Canada. And I mean, there's a lot of dreamers and dreaming. And I think the other thing too is, it's one thing to say this is what I want to do. It's another thing to be driven enough or to be dumb enough to actually do it. You know, to take that step out. It's scary. It's really fucking scary to say, hey, I'm going to tie myself to this for the rest of my life, and I'm going to spend a lot of money getting this off the ground, and this may not work. You know, it's a gamble, and I'm not sure what got me over that hump. I'm not sure what exactly got me to that point where I took that leap. I took that and said, you know what, screw it, let's just do it. But I think there's a lot of reasons that hold people back, and I think part of my ability to be able to, or not my ability, but part of me to get to where I am was just that leap of faith, and hoping that it would all work out, and trusting myself enough that you know what, I might be okay doing this. You know, it's going to be a tough couple of years, but I'll eventually get there. So, yeah. And I think goal setting along the way, like the business side of it was something. It's not just showing up to an event and shucking oysters. You're right. How do I get legal? How do I get the job? How do I price the job? How do I present myself when I'm at this job? How do I keep in touch after the fact? How do I collect payment sometimes? That's so many steps. And then what's next? And then in a year, now that I'm coming up on a year, what do I want to do in year 2 for Big Shucker? What do I want to focus on? And that's where it's a constant evolving process that it really attracts me about it. It makes me happy I took the leap of faith, but it's also like, whoa, like what is this? What the hell am I doing? I have no idea what I'm doing, but I kind of like it, you know?
You mentioned networking a few times, and I've said this before, and I say this in a lot of like coffee meetings to new realtors or whatever in our industry, is that networking is the most overtalked but underrated idea in business. So people say it all the time. They're like, how do you get started? Oh, you got to network. You got to go to these events. You got to meet people, blah, 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 blah. What does it actually mean and how to grow a business? The value of building relationships in and outside of your industry is so valuable long-term. It's insane. So like meeting John through our friends and now you're doing his Christmas party. Like it's insane.
Well, doing this podcast.
100%.
I mean, knowing Alex growing up, being buddies with Alex and the D'Angelos, and then now I'm doing a podcast with you. Like, if you told me when I was a kid, when Alex was breaking one finger, that that I can in 20 years from now, you're gonna own an oyster shucking company and be on a podcast, you're fucking crazy.
If you told me 12 months ago I'd be hosting a podcast, I would have told you you're fucking crazy.
Fair enough, yeah. So yeah, but I mean, I think what you said is exactly right when it comes to networking. Is how is it meaningful? Because it's one thing to be, I know that guy. There's another thing for that guy to think of me when we talk about oyster shucking.
For sure.
What makes Scotty the guy, and that's what makes, I think, what I do so unique. Is the fact that I'm not selling a product. I'm selling myself. There's no problem. I'm not sitting there saying, hey, here's an oyster. I really think you'd like it. I'm saying the oyster, you can get the oyster anywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. You'll have that oyster. I'm the reason why you're hiring me. And it's the whole thing from top to bottom. And it's weird because when I wake up to when I go to sleep, to the beard is part of the brand. You know what I mean? And there's so many layers to it that really sort of speak out. A Big Shucker it's the name. It if you think about a company that describes itself in its name, Big Shucker describes itself pretty aptly. I mean, I am the Big Shucker. I mean, sure, there's guys that are bigger than me that I shuck, but I mean, I have become the Big Shucker. So I think there's a little bit of that that branding and like you said, that networking. What's the difference between, hey, yeah, I know that guy's a great guy, to, yeah, I know that guy, he's a shucker, he's the one of the best shuckers I know, he's so knowledgeable. I when I think about a party, that's the guy I want there. And that becomes tricky, but it's also because I think it comes naturally. I don't want to play it off like it's like I'm very lucky with that. It's something that I don't have to work very hard. I think that's what makes me a good shucker, is the fact that you want to come and hang out. You want to hang out. Not only do you want to have me shuck your oyster, but you're going to say, hey, you want a beer? And you want to have a beer with me. You're going to hang out with me. We're going to talk as I shuck oysters. And you might come over and be like, hey, can you teach me? And it's a very fluid, evolving process.
You're a year into the business?
Yeah, March will be a year, so I'm 10 months.
So you're fairly new.
Yep.
Something I want to ask you, because you've talked so much about like yourself being the brand, I think a lot of early young entrepreneurs feel the same way. But you get to a point where you're capped.
Yeah. And
then if you are the business, how do you scale? Or do you want to scale?
Yeah, no, I do. And I think that becomes along with the goals, and that becomes with who I align myself with. So
they have to be bearded?
No, not necessarily. But I mean, I think if I'm going to hire somebody else, it's going to be like the personality's got to be big.
100%.
You know, and so I have a really great friend who's working with me right now on Big Shucker, and she's doing a great job with the social media and maintaining like a peer-to-peer sort of relationships. And I'm doing more of that, going out and getting stuff. But I've also got, or more getting out new clients and networking from I guess a point of sale side of things. I also have buddies. Like I've got a pseudo business partner who runs a catering company called Salt and Earth, and he does full-blown catering. I kept what I do very niche. Now I have done some stuff where it's a little bit, where it's not just oysters and caviar. I can do other things. I have done other things, but for me, I wanted to keep it niche. There's a lot of caterers out there. There's no point in muddying the waters. I think what I would do I would do it well, but there's no point in like, for me, I wanted to be the oyster guy, not the caterer who does oysters. But I work with John Merrill, who does who owns Salt and Earth Catering. Him and his wife run that, and we work pretty hand in hand. I'll bring him on for shucking events because he's a fantastic shucker. He'll bring me on for catering events if he can't do the shucking. So it's a pretty nice relationship. And I think the goal for both of us, whether it be together or separately, is to own a restaurant. And so what's the next step? The next step is to keep building the catering side of things, because you don't need a brick and mortar. The nice thing about what I do is I don't have to pay rent on what I'm doing. I have to pay car insurance. You know what I mean? A business license and car insurance.
Well, one thing you said that I think is really important to even just touch on a little bit more is building a business, building a culture, and understanding what the culture of a business is, and then hiring to fit the culture.
Yeah.
So hiring personalities and people, doesn't matter if they're men, women, doesn't matter if they have a fantastic beard like you, but just like people that fit the culture and will fit the realm of like what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So I think I'm a little bit more particular about that than people realize. Because when I show up and get things ready to go, there has been a lot of thought put into the way the bar looks, to the way that I present my sauces or lemons, or however it may be. Like the way I cut lemons is a little bit different what normally is done, and I think it looks beautiful. So instead of cutting it like you would like orange slices for a soccer game, you cut them so where you see like the individual pieces of the lemon, you get that white stripes throughout. I think it looks beautiful. I'm sure there's people out there it's stupid, but for me it's little things, making sure the bar is clean, making sure that if there's garbage cans out, that they're empty at all times. You know, let's make sure that they're small enough that we have to make sure that the people always feel like they're clean. So there's certain aspects to that really appeal to me. But what were we talking about? I just went on another tangent. I completely forgot.
Scaling culture.
Yeah. So I mean, the idea I would love to get to the point where I've got 3 or 4 different events on the go, and I've got different people shucking different events, or I've got something that's so big that I need to have 3 or 4 people working it at one time. So there's definitely that goal there, and that's going to be, it's sort of a race to see what happens first at this point in time. If we build it that much, or we get the restaurant first and sort of hire in the restaurant that way, you know, but there's a lot of thought that goes into what's next and how I want to present and how I want to be represented when it comes to these types of things. So
you mentioned a restaurant. What's the big picture for Big Shucker and Scotty?
So I think I have some pretty cool ideas I'm not going to get super in depth with because I want to keep those pretty close to the heart. But I think I want to do sort of what made me fall in love with the restaurant industry, which is that true East Coast style, raw bar, pescatarian type of place where the menu's simple. We'll have a soup, oysters, a couple appetizers. I want to do a true East Coast style crab cake, no filler. Just want it to be all crab, you know, a little remoulade to keep it all together. Oh man. And then basically I want to have that as like sort of the base. And then I want to wake up every morning at 8 a.m. with a phone call, text message being like, hey Scotty, this is what came in on the boat today. It's super fresh. Do you want to use it? And sort of develop a menu, a constantly, like a daily, almost rotating menu around what the chef can come up with, and keep it constantly fresh, constantly fun. I don't want to be open. I want to be closed 2 days out of the week. You know, let's focus on recharging the batteries. I want to make sure everybody's taken care of. I want to do great cocktails, fantastic wine, good beer, and I want it to be a place where people can come in and feel happy that they're coming in to spend money at. You know, they want to come here. It's not we're coming. I guess we got to go out for a meal. Let's go out with a bunch of people. This is something special that we can go to celebrate. But this is also somewhere where we can go every single day and just have a drink at the bar and go home. So that's sort of the goal, is to do. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to take what I love, what I think would do well, and make it successful in this city. And I think that comes back to what we talked about, the passion, surrounding myself with the people and the passion. What started it for me was seeing these people who loved what they did, who would, I don't want to say agonize, but would think and constantly be thinking about, how do I make this better? What do I do? How do how do I make this the best dish I can make right now, and then explore that, and what can we do next time? How do we make it better, and really impressing the people that way. So that's sort of the goal right now for getting a restaurant started. And I think, and that's a whole other conversation too. With the restaurant, raise a bunch of money, get a bunch of investors, and try to make it work and try to make it work from a grassroots level, or do we start with the grassroots level, build the catering to the point where, hey, I love what you do. I want to be able to have it every day of the week. Here's a bunch of money. Start a restaurant, So I'm sort of up in the air between the two, because that's when we get back to that food truck side. You have how many times people start as food trucks, and all of a sudden they're so popular, like, let's start a brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm. It's just tough to go straight into restaurant in Greater Vancouver because it's so expensive to do so, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, how many fail in restaurant industry across the board? Not just Vancouver.
Most.
But yeah, how much time does it fail? And the margins are low. The margins are even lower in a place like Vancouver, where the real estate and labor is very high, where even the cost of goods is high. How do we make that feasible? And how do we make that not necessarily affordable, because not to make it sound cheap, but an affordable luxury, in essence, is how do we still make it doable for everybody to be able to come out and who are going to enjoy it? You're going to spend money, but how are you going to, where's that value at? And finding that value is tough in Vancouver.
Totally.
So
What? I love talking to people like you who are just like so passionate about what they do, whether it's shucking oysters, selling real estate, like literally whatever, coaching softball, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
I like talking to people that are super excited about what they're doing every day. And so these are the conversations that I absolutely love.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I mean, and to be honest, I love the platform. I love the platform to be able to talk about it, because I really do appreciate you getting me on here, because it is fantastic. I do. It's almost cathartic to be able to sit here and as I'm saying things like, oh man, and that never dawned on me, or well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever said. I gotta scratch it off my thought process. So yeah, it happens
so often in the podcast where one of the guests says something, and it recreates a memory in my head of like, oh shit, maybe that helped propel me to where I am, or like whatever, right?
Yeah,
it's so cool.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything about talking about it too, but I love the idea of building it, and like I said, the goal setting and seeing where we're going to be and how it's going to end up. So, yeah.
To end every podcast, I tell my guests to make the final statement. So that could be like the most interesting thing you know about an oyster. Could be like the biggest fail you've had in a business and what you learned from it, or whatever. Biggest piece of advice you learned along the way that someone gave you.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything that's too
doesn't need to be that epic. It could be like you trash talking your buddy who you said was the best oyster shucker in Toronto.
No, I mean, to end it all, I think we'll end on a positive note. We'll keep it positive.
What was his name?
Eamon. The guy in the city the two guys in the city that I love are John Merrill and Mike Gill. Like those guys, they're great shuckers too, and they scare me when it comes to shucking, because they're good, they're quick.
I heard you beat their ass in the BC competition.
I won the BCs, and we're not going to talk about what they've done. We're just gonna talk about what I've done. And so as far as that, I'm the BC 2018 into 2019 BC champion.
Good for you, man. We'll
go for it again in June, hopefully, and we'll see how we do in June for that. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, it's such a cool culture. I mean, I think I guess if we can do a couple plugs, keep your guys' eyes open. Bikers for Autism at Chewy's in Cole Harbour is a fantastic shucking competition for a lot of people. It's the first chance and one of the only chances in Vancouver they get to come out and see a shucking competition.
Is that the one in June?
That's the one in May. I think it's May 26th this year. I think it's going on the 5th or 6th year of Shuck It Forward.
Okay.
I think it's the 5th year Shuck It Forward. So Shuck It Forward is done by Bikers for Autism, where all the proceeds go towards the Bikers for Autism charity. Helps out families where the parents need to take a day off to take a kid to an appointment or something like that. But it's a great time. You will remember showing up. I can almost guarantee you will not remember leaving. It is one of the sloppiest. But everybody who I've told to come comes and have said who I've told to come who has made it said it is one of the best times they've had in Vancouver. So I'm not sure when the tickets are going on sale, but check out Bikers for Autism, Shuck It Forward, Chewy's in Cole Harbour. because that's a great event. And then June will be the BC Seafood Festival out in Comox. That's a cool one too. If you it's like a 10-day event where they're putting on cooking demonstrations. You can try everything that BC and the Pacific Northwest has to offer in terms of seafood. So if you get an opportunity to go out even for a day, go out and check it out because it's cool. So it's gonna be my two sort of plugs here, and just because I like hearing my voice talk. But I think from a business standpoint, I think the biggest thing for me was the constant evolution of the business, and each step sort of taking a step back to reflect and taking a look on what we can do differently the next time, how we can make it better. And the other one is if you have an idea, you do your research, and you still think it's a good idea, then take that leap. I mean, that's huge. That to me that's what holds most people up, is not taking that jump, not saying that. I mean, one of the best things you can do is work for yourself. It's a pain in the ass. It's a lot of work. But when you get there and you're doing it, and it doesn't always pay off the way you expect. I mean, I'm not going to be driving around a Lamborghini, but why would I? I've got a 52 Chef. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about doing it, because it's you, and if you can make it work, it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So, what
do you want to do for the rest of your life? Do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? What a good fucking quote. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. If you the other one, if you feel like you never work, if you never go to work, then I clearly don't know.
If you love what you never work a day in your life.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So that's key. Right now I shuck oysters. I shuck oysters and I sell beer. I mean, how much better does life get?
It's hard to beat that,
right? I mean, I can't complain about life. So nothing to complain about right now.
Scotty, thanks so much for coming on.
No worries. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure getting to know you better.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's going to be a couple beers in our near future.
There will definitely. Some beers, oysters. We'll have a good time for sure.
If people want to know more about the Big Shucker business, how do they find you on social media?
So everything's at Big Shucker. Facebook, Instagram. I think there's a LinkedIn. I believe there's a LinkedIn.
Your business partner does that. Yeah.
bigshucker@gmail.com is a good way to email me if you have any questions, comments, concerns. You think I'm full of shit, let me know. Because my phone's attached to my hip. This is the longest I think I haven't looked at it in months. So the Big Shucker, and let me know if you're interested in booking me, have any oyster questions, have any concerns. Let me know.
Awesome.
Beauty.
Guys, thanks so much for listening. Hit me up on Instagram with your feedback. Denny.Dumas. Later.